The rain was relentless, mirroring the storm inside me. I stared out the window of my small apartment in Minneapolis, the city lights blurring through the streaks of water. At 43, I was supposed to be at the peak of my life. A successful IT specialist, a comfortable home in the suburbs, a loving wife or so, I thought. My name is Alaric, and my world had crumbled in the past few weeks. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Gemma, my wife of 15 years, began acting distant. We'd always been close, sharing everything from our daily frustrations to our deepest fears. But lately she'd been withdrawn, her smile strained, her eyes holding a secret I couldn't decipher. "Long day?" I'd ask when she came home from her job as a marketing manager. "Yeah, just swamped," she'd reply, avoiding eye contact. The excuses piled up: late meetings, weekend conferences, girls' nights out that stretched later and later. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe work was genuinely stressful, but the feeling persisted, a knot tightening in my stomach with each passing day. Then came the phone calls. Gemma's phone was always on silent, a habit she'd developed years ago, but now she'd clutch it possessively, her eyes darting around if I entered the room while she was talking. Her voice would drop to a whisper, the conversation abruptly ending if I got too close. "Who was that?" I'd ask casually. "Oh, just a client," she'd say, her tone dismissive. "Nothing important." But her flushed cheeks and averted gaze told a different story. The final straw was the perfume. Gemma had always worn a light floral scent, something delicate and understated. But one evening she came home reeking of something musky and unfamiliar, a fragrance that clung to her clothes like a second skin. "New perfume?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She hesitated, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh, this? Yeah, a colleague gave me a sample. Do you like it?" I didn't. It felt like a violation, a blatant sign that something was deeply wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie, that the woman I loved was slipping away from me and I was powerless to stop it. So I did what any rational, albeit heartbroken man would do. I started digging. I knew it was a breach of trust, a violation of her privacy. But I couldn't live with the uncertainty any longer. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I started with her phone. I waited until she was asleep, her breathing deep and even, and carefully unlocked it with her fingerprint. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding in my chest. There were dozens of texts from an unknown number, each one more sickening than the last. "I can't stop thinking about you," one read. "When can I see you again?" another said. "I had such a wonderful time last night. You're amazing." My blood ran cold. I scrolled further, my eyes scanning the screen, searching for any clue, any explanation. And then I found it: a name. Lysander. There were photos, two snapshots of Gemma and a man, laughing, holding hands, their faces radiant with a happiness that I hadn't seen in years. The man was tall, handsome, with a confident smile and piercing blue eyes. He was everything I wasn't. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, my vision blurring with tears. It was all true. Gemma was cheating on me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, was betraying me in the most intimate way possible. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, the sound shattering the silence of the room. Gemma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Alaric, what's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just held out the phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. She took one look at the screen and her face drained of color. "Alaric, I don't," I said, my voice hoarse. "Just done." I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, out of the life that I had known. I spent the night in a cheap motel, the images of Gemma and Lysander seared into my brain. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think. I was numb, hollowed out like a puppet with its strings cut. The next morning I went back to the house. Gemma was waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen. "Alaric, please let me explain," she pleaded. "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice flat. "I saw the messages, I saw the photos, it's over." But I love you," she stammered. "How can you say that?" I asked, my voice rising. "How can you love me and do this to me?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You betrayed me, Gemma. You destroyed everything we had." I told her I wanted a divorce. I packed a bag and left, not looking back. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork, tearful phone calls from friends and family, and sleepless nights filled with anger and despair. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a sterile, impersonal space that felt like a reflection of my own empty heart. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office, trying to distract myself from the pain. But it was no use. Everywhere I looked, I saw Gemma's face, heard her voice, felt her touch. I couldn't escape the memories, the dreams, the what-ifs. I started seeing a therapist, a kind, empathetic woman named Ingrid who helped me unpack my emotions and process my grief. She told me that I was a victim of betrayal, that I had every right to feel angry and hurt. She encouraged me to focus on myself, to rebuild my life, to find happiness again. But it was hard. It felt like a part of me had died, that I would never be whole again. One day, Ingrid suggested that I try to understand Gemma's motivations, not to excuse her behavior, but to gain closure. Sometimes understanding can bring a sense of peace, she said. It can help you move on. So I decided to confront Gemma one last time. I met her at a coffee shop, a neutral location that felt strangely symbolic. She looked tired, worn down, like a shadow of her former self. "Why, Gemma?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it?" Hesitated, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, Alaric," she said. "I wasn't happy. I felt like we were drifting apart. I felt like I was missing something." "But why didn't you talk to me?" I asked. "We could have worked through it." "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of what you would say, afraid of losing you." "But you lost me anyway," I said, my voice hardening. "You lost me when you made the choice to betray me." She started to cry, her shoulders shaking. "I know," she sobbed. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved, and I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of anger. "You broke my heart, Gemma," I said, my voice trembling. "You destroyed my trust, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you." I stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there, alone and heartbroken. As I walked down the street, I felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also been cathartic. I had finally said what I needed to say, and I had finally let go. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered it. "Hello," I said. "Alaric, it's Lysander." My blood ran cold. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tight. "I need to talk to you," he said. "It's about Gemma." We met at a bar, a dimly lit establishment that felt like a clandestine meeting place. Lysander looked nervous, fidgety, like a man with a guilty conscience. "I know what you're thinking," he said, "but I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to tell you the truth." He told me that Gemma had lied to him, that she had told him that we were separated, that she was planning to leave me. He said that he had no idea that she was still married until a few weeks ago, when she had finally confessed. "I was shocked," he said. "I felt betrayed. I ended things with her immediately." I stared at him, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said, "and because I feel responsible. I never would have gotten involved with her if I had known she was married." He then dropped a bombshell. "Gemma is pregnant," he said. "She told me it's mine." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Pregnant," I stammered. "Butho." "She said it happened before we broke up," Lysander said. "She's convinced it's mine, but I have my doubts." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I think you should get a DNA test," he said. "I think there's a chance it could be yours." I was stunned, speechless. The idea that Gemma was pregnant with my child after everything that had happened was almost too much to bear. I agreed to the DNA test, my mind reeling. A few weeks later, the results came back. The child was not Lysander's, it was mine. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me was elated, overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a father. But another part of me was filled with anger and resentment. How could Gemma do this to me? How could she carry my child while betraying me with another man? I confronted her again, this time at her lawyer's office. "It's mine, isn't it?" I said, my voice trembling. She nodded, her eyes filled with shame. "I was going to tell you," she said, "but I didn't know how. How could you keep this from me?" I asked, my voice rising. "How could you carry my child while sleeping with another man?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "I was so confused, so lost, I didn't know what to do." I told her that I wanted to be involved in the child's life, that I wanted to be a father, but I also told her that I could never forgive her for what she had done. "I'll be there for our child," I said, "but I can't be with you, not after everything that's happened." The divorce was finalized a few months later. Gemma moved to another city to be closer to her family. I stayed in Minneapolis, determined to build a new life for myself and my child. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and utterly alone. But I persevered, driven by the love for my unborn child. When my daughter Astrid was born, I was there. I held her in my arms, and I knew that everything had changed. She was my reason for living, my source of strength, my hope for the future. I never forgave Gemma for her betrayal, but I learned to accept it. I learned that life is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. But I also learned that it's possible to find happiness again, even after the most devastating heartbreak. I focused on being the best father I could be to Astrid, showering her with love, support, and guidance. And in time, I found love again, with a woman who valued honesty, loyalty, and trust above all else. My life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I had a beautiful daughter, a loving partner, and a sense of purpose. And that, I realized, was enough. Looking back, I see that Gemma's betrayal was a turning point in my life. It forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to reevaluate my priorities, and to discover my inner strength. It was a painful journey, but it ultimately made me a better man. And for that I am grateful. Several years passed. Astrid grew into a bright, inquisitive, and loving young girl. I never spoke ill of Gemma in front of her, always emphasizing that, despite our differences, her mother loved her very much. Gemma, to her credit, remained consistent in her support, attending school events and sharing in Astrid's milestones. However, the distance between us remained palpable, a constant reminder of the chasm her actions had created. One afternoon, as I was helping Astrid with her homework, my phone rang. It was Gemma. Her voice was strained, barely a whisper. "Alaric, I need your help," she said, her words laced with panic. "Lysander's back." My heart sank. Lysander had resurfaced a few times over the years, each time causing Gemma immense distress. He was a manipulative man, and I had always feared he would try to worm his way back into her life. "What happened?" I asked, my voice tight. "He's threatening to tell Astrid everything," she sobbed. "He says he'll tell her about our affair, about the DNA test, about everything. He wants money, Alaric. He says if I don't pay him, he'll ruin everything." I felt a surge of anger, not just at Lysander, but at Gemma for allowing herself to be vulnerable to him again. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm at my apartment," she said. "He's here, he won't leave." I told her to stay put and that I would be there as soon as possible. I hung up the phone and turned to Astrid, who was watching me with wide, concerned eyes. "Everything's okay, sweetie," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "I just need to go help your mom with something. I'll be back soon." I drove to Gemma's apartment, my mind racing. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't let Lysander hurt Astrid. When I arrived, I found Gemma standing outside the building, her face pale and tear-streaked. "He's inside," she said, her voice trembling. "He won't let me in." I took a deep breath and walked into the building. I found Lysander in Gemma's apartment, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He was older, heavier, and his eyes held a desperate, almost manic gleam. "Well, well, well," he said, spotting me. "Look who's here, the cuckold himself." I ignored his taunt and focused on Gemma. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes fixed on Lysander. "Get out of here, Alaric," Lysander snarled. "This is between me and Gemma." "It's over, Lysander," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Leave her alone." "Or what?" he sneered. "What are you going to do about it?" I stepped closer to him, my fists clenching. "I'm not going to let you hurt her," I said. "Or Astrid." Lysander laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Astrid," he said. "You think that little girl is going to love you when she finds out the truth about her mother, about you?" "She already loves me," I said. "And she'll always love me, because I'm her father. And you're nothing but a pathetic loser who's trying to extort money from a woman he used to sleep with." Lysander lunged at me, his eyes filled with rage. I sidestepped him and grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. He cried out in pain, struggling to break free. "Get out," I said, my voice cold. "And if you ever come near Gemma or Astrid again, I'll make sure you regret it." I released him and he stumbled backward, clutching his arm. He glared at me, his face contorted with hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. "I'll get you for this." He turned and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him. I turned to Gemma, who was watching me with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you, Alaric," she said, her voice barely audible. I don't know what I would have done without you." "It's okay," I said. "Just promise me you'll stay away from him. He's bad news." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I promise," she said. "I never should have let him back into my life." I stayed with Gemma for a while, making sure she was safe and calm. As I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. "Alaric," she said, "I know I've hurt you in the past, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything." I looked at her, at the woman who had once been my wife, and I saw a genuine remorse in her eyes. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive her, but I knew that I had to move on, for Astrid's sake and for my own. "Thank you, Gemma," I said. "I appreciate that." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone with her regrets. As I drove home, I felt a sense of closure, a sense that I had finally put the past behind me. I knew that Gemma's betrayal would always be a part of my story, but it wouldn't define me. I was a father, a survivor, and a man who had learned to love again. And that was enough. In the years that followed, I focused on raising Astrid, on building a life filled with love, laughter, and happiness. Gemma remained a part of our lives, but our relationship was strictly platonic, centered around our daughter. I never fully trusted her again, but I respected her as a mother and as a human being. And as for Lysander, he disappeared from our lives, hopefully for good. I learned that forgiveness is not about condoning someone's actions, but about releasing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. It's about choosing to move forward, to heal, and to create a better future for yourself and your loved ones. And that, I believe, is the greatest revenge of all.